Okay, so what we will do today is, as declared, the lecture is about file pointers and files. But before we go into that, I will be taking one uh, small topic, which is what is called as argc and argv. So if you have noticed, typically we are writing the function, uh, the main function basically is of the form. So what are the declarations of main function? You might have seen declaration is basically int main. In very archaic definitions, basically, or declarations, archaic meaning a long time back, when perhaps, let's say, I was a student, even this was also allowed. And I don't know if some compilers still allow this. But then another declaration that was used those days, and even that is used these days also, that either you declare your main function like this, and so that what happens is your body of the function, either it looks something like this. Whether you want to write void over here or int over here is another story altogether. But or you just want to write main, and maybe some compilers assume it to be by default as integer. That's another story. And you need not return back integer also. I mean, you need not say return 0 or return 1 or anything like that. Even then it assumes that some default integer is returned. So these are some special facilities provided to the main function. But and this is one. But the other one, which is also heavily used, or other, many times those of you who have seen the code written by other people, mainly by professionals on GitHub or at other places, you would have noticed that the declaration also goes something like this. And I'm going to write that over here. I hope my voice is audible, right? I mean, Shiva, you can confirm.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the other declaration that you will typically see is something like this. Okay. So you have the first argument, which is called as argc, and the second argument is called as argv. Okay. Yeah. So what does this stand for? Argc and argv. That is the question. So firstly, where does the main function run? I mean, and where does the main function take the inputs from? These are essentially the inputs to the main function. The first question to be asked is, where does the main function take input from? So I'm expecting some answer.
Sir, from the operating system.
No. Okay. So when I said no to operating system, actually, I mean, one can say that because main function runs with operating system, so moment you give answers operating system, it's always right, right? I mean, it's something which cannot be contested. But that is not what I was looking for. That doesn't help me. So the input which could be given to the main function. What is the main function essentially? It's your program. So when you want to run your program, you essentially run the main function, right? So the input that your program takes. So when I ask the question that where does your program is taking the input, so it's not operating system which is actually giving the input. Operating system is more like a communicator, like a postman. But the input is essentially given by the user. And where does the user give the input from? So user gives the input from, as some of the people have written on the chat box, they could give the input from the command line or from the terminal. Okay. So rather they can give the input on the command line or on the terminal, okay, through keyboard. Okay, that's what happens. Now you may say, sir, there is a UI. Agreed. I mean, UI is just one layer over that command line or whatever it is. Internally, it calls the main function. Essentially, it just transports the input. So input comes from the keyboard, from the user to the keyboard to the command line, basically, and from that command line, it is picked up by the main function. So if you don't give any input, it just runs as it is. But imagine that your program actually requires an input. I mean, rather than prompting the user that, okay, give me this and this value and that value, etc. Perhaps if we already know the format in which the input needs to be given, why can't I give it on the command line? That is the question. And this should not be a surprise to you, basically, because if you notice, or I don't know whether you must have done it in software lab, well, that you think of it like this. It's an analogy, so it's not perfect fit, but think of it like this. Let's say that you want to do on the Unix system, you want to find out the set of files which are in the existing directory. So what is the command that you use? Does anyone know what is the command which is used? Yeah, ls. But then ls is, you can either do ls or you can do ls minus l, or I can do ls minus al, and there are many other options I can, or I can as well, I could have done minus a minus l and all those things. So there are many options that we can provide to the command. Now, if you notice, what ls over here is actually name of the program. Okay, that is that we are running. It's an executable, but essentially that executable is named with a name ls over there. So we are saying I want to run this executable having, or I want to run this program whose name is ls. And I'm to that program, I'm directly giving the inputs over here as minus a minus l or minus al or whatever basically. And you see many different, this is just very simple example, you see many different Unix commands. There are so many so many flags that you can set, or so many commands you can give to, or so many what is called options that every command has, and all those things can be specified on the command line. Okay. Well, you will say, is this now related? Whatever I'm discussing, is this related only with the command line operations? The answer is, I mean, only with respect to the Unix command. The answer is no. For example, my program could be basically GCD, and this is the name of the program, and I will give inputs over here directly, rather than user asking. I will say GCD 12 and 18. And then I will, without then program should not ask me any inputs, and it should directly print the GCD of these two numbers, let's say, which is 6. And that is what I'm expecting. So the mechanism in which this can be captured is through this argc and argv in C language, and many other languages like Java, etc., also have followed the same mechanism. So what is argc then? So argc over here, essentially, argc is the number of arguments on the command line. Including, by the way, including name of the program. That is the first word that you write. Okay, so I will say that here it is 3, right? argc is 3. Okay, so 0, but there are three arguments over here. Okay, then what is argv? Okay, argv seems to be an array of char star, and we know that char star is nothing but string. So essentially argv seems to be an array of strings, right? So what argv over here is, let's say that I take this GCD example, or any of ls minus l example I can take. So I will say that argv looks something like this. So argv is an array, and this argv of 0 basically is a string, and that string happens to be, let's say, GCD. Okay, argv1 is also a string, and that string happens to be 12, and argv2 also is a string, and that string happens to be 18. Okay, so what we have done is, or rather what the operating system has done, is that it has captured the inputs which are given on the command line. Okay, and it understands that the first word is essentially the name of the program. So it picked it up, and then it called that program, and to that program it created two inputs. One is argc. So in this case argc is 3, so it says first argument is 3, and second argument is created an array of strings, and in that array of strings it wrote the name of the program as the in the 0th location. Although you may say this is useless because you already know which program you are running, and that point is fine, but just for the information sake they have written this name of the program again over here, and then the first argument which is 12 over here, and second argument which is 18 over here, and things could continue like this. Okay, so now what happens, or otherwise basically let's consider something like ls minus al, basically something like this. So in that particular case, again argv would be argc will be 3 only, and argv of 0 in this particular case is given by ls. argv1 will be given by, let's say, minus a, and argv2 is given by minus L. Now, how do you use it? So you use it basically, now you are the program writer, right? I mean, this is what you expect. So what you can do over here is that name of the program you can just ignore. Basically, you know that it's your program which is running. So operating system is correctly running the appropriate program. So you will not bother about that. So you will not bother about argv0. So it's essentially you want to filter, and those who use Linux command also know that it actually doesn't matter. I mean, whether minus L I write early or minus A, I could have written ls minus L minus A also, which means exactly the same thing. So what the first perhaps thing I need to do is I need to capture all these options which have been given. So perhaps I can have a loop, and I will say that my loop basically, let's say int I, and my loop goes from I equal to 0. But now the good thing is argc, why argc is important is argc has given me the size of the array. Okay, that is why argc was given. So I will just say that for I equal to 0, I less than argc, or let's say I have to start from I equal to 1 because 0 is anyway the program name, so I need not bother about that, and I plus plus. Okay, and then over here what I will directly do is I will say, okay, I can just directly do switch over. I will just do a switch over argvi. Okay, starting from 1, and then perhaps I'm just giving you an instance of how this can be used. And then the first basically I'm just searching whether have you given minus L. In that particular case I do something. Okay, and then basically after that I say a break, and if it is not that, then basically I will say, okay, if it is minus A, then there is something else basically, and if it is minus A, then I will say that this is some other thing you have to do, and you have to do a break, and likewise. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking actions based on each of the options which have been provided, and it doesn't matter in this particular case. You see that I don't care about which order the options they do appear, right?
Sir, but C doesn't allow string arguments in switch.
Yeah, I get it. So yeah, so in that particular case, what typically happens is the first, again, in that particular string, good point. So in that particular string, so this was more for annotation I was doing, but if you are very specific about that, then in that particular case, what will happen is you will have to first copy this argv of I. Okay, even this it will not allow this also. So what you will have to do is you have to copy, string copy you have to do. So you have to do strcpy, and then you have to use you'll have to use basically over here some another array. Let's say you have declared already, so let's say that it is a temp array, and to this basically you copy argvi. Okay, and then the switch will be on the character. So this was more like annotation I was doing, that what is the idea basically. But if you are very specific about language, let's go there, and then basically over here, so now argvi itself is been copied into temp. And now you can basically go over temp0, temp1, temp2, like that. Okay, and now there are many other options. Again, don't pick me on that because there are many different ways in which you can write this. I can write as minus L minus A, I can write minus A minus L, I can write my ls minus L, and likewise. Okay, so you can figure out appropriate way of doing this over here. Whether switch is the correct way of doing it, or you want to go through this temp array one a character by character, it is completely up to you. Okay, the general idea over here is that you know what is there in argv0, you know what is there in argv1, you know there is. So Unix commands are little bit more stringent in the sense that rather more flexible, I would say, another way, that because they don't care about which option is written at which place. But maybe when you run the program like GCD, you might be very careful about what comes as first argument, what comes as second argument, what comes as third argument. Any other program, for example, where you already know what, and the user also knows that what is the order of inputs which are coming in. So essentially, that is the main point. That is the overall point. Now, you can go through that and you can decide how to implement this. But essentially, the idea is that you know that the number of arguments are there in argc. The actual arguments are in argv, starting from argv0, which contains the name of the program, Another argument actually contains the arguments. Even for there, if you realize that this parsing this 12 and 18 is not, pretty easy, because over there, remember that this has been passed not as a number but as a string. Even there, you need to first figure out that first character over here happens to be a digit, okay, or a digit character, and then you have to guess that this is a number, and then you have to convert a string to a digit, that string to a number. So that you need to have separate function. Again, if I start writing that, it will take a lot of time. So this basically, this logic has to be implemented over there. So again, just for annotation, I could have said that if it is a number, a num, then it is basically I use that number as 12 or 18 or something like that. But essentially, the idea is that conditional, basically, you could figure out what is the type of that particular argument based on one or two characters over there. And from that, you can realize that what it should be. There could be error also, right? Basically, I can say 1 to A, and this particular error also needs to be captured, because then you need to realize that basically every next character that you are getting is actually not a digit but actual alphabet. And then you should create an error. You should say that there is an error in the way program has been given. So the whole idea, basically, I could have just left it by saying that the args is number of arguments and argv is just the set of arguments, and they need to be parsed. Okay. So if it is a number, we'll have to change the type to integer, as it will be stored as character. I'm not going to answer this question or this doubt, because I already said what it is. There is a, and at this point, after DSPD1 is done, you should be equipped to do this. I have said that argvi is a string. It's not a character. It's not a number also. Now you have your own way. If I give you a string, can you not convert that string? Can you not identify first that it is a number? And can you not convert that string into an actual integer? Okay, think over it. I think you are equipped to do this at this point now. So again, that's why I'm saying that these details I don't want to get into. That is the whole problem that I face. That once I start, little bit annotating the things and little bit describing things, I get picked up on the actual syntax or actual logic. That is not the idea. The idea is I could have just got away from this by saying that args is number of arguments and argv is the arguments written in the string format. You decide how to parse it, and you convert into an appropriate types and store it as appropriate types. So take it as a challenge. Basically, I can give any type in this, including 3.3.4 also. Tomorrow I can give something, some float addition. I can write a function called, I can write a program called as fat, and I can provide you 3.4 and 3.5 and 13.8. Remember that this 3.5 and 13.8 over here are also not numbers now, but they are essentially strings. So if they are strings, basically they are stored in string format, then how are you going to convert them actually into the float value, which is 13.8 is the question. Okay. So again, these are the things I think you are equipped to handle this at this point. I mean, you are given a string, all these characters are there, you have to identify what characters. This is called as parsing. That when the string is given, even your program is written as a string. Okay, and what the compiler is doing is it is parsing the set of strings to figure out that whether you have written a switch or you have written a while or you have written whatever. So this parsing basically is very basic parsing will be required to be done in this particular case. Okay, so this is about the argc and argv. So this is the first part of it. Okay, now we will move on to the next part, which is files and file pointers. So I'll just give you a minute to if you want to contemplate on this or you want to write something. I'm just giving you a minute to do that. Okay, if you want to write some notes or write some points over here, I'll just give a minute and then we'll start in a minute. Okay, so which is the next part, which is I'm just knowingly I'm taking a 1 minute break over here, so that because I'm starting a different topic, so we just want to get away from this. Okay, so 1 minute for you. You write down the stuff if you want to have. Otherwise, if you want to contemplate on this, what it is all about, and in case if you have some question, I don't guarantee that I will answer that question, but you may pose the question. I may just address it. Okay, fine. Okay, so let's get back now. Okay. Now, again, this topic that I am taking is, you can say, is it part of data structure? The answer is no. I mean, it's more of programming language, and perhaps this is something that you should have been covered in the first programming course, that is in C programming, which never gets covered. Perhaps at most of the places, not only at our place, but at other places also. And most of the teachers say that, okay, you use files to do something. Okay, and it is the onus of the students to learn this. Exactly same thing happened with me also when I was a student. So my teacher told me that, okay, I'm not going to teach you files. These are one or two functions I'm just telling you. You go back and you do on your own. It's more of a topic which is to be practiced and not to be taught or learned. So even I am of the similar opinion, but still, what I'm going to do now today is that I will just give you a glimpse of what different things are possible, why this is important for us, and for us as programmers. And I will give you a glimpse of how to handle these things. Again, I will be giving you a bigger picture. Now, perhaps I will be mentioning definitely the names of the functions, etc., etc. But I will not be taking code per se. It's more of informative things, what all things can be done and how they can be done. Let me just check if any question was asked. Nothing was asked. Okay, fine. So why do we require files and file pointers? File pointers, just forget about this. File pointers are the way in which we implement the files. So in the C language. So that is inherent part of files themselves. Just because it uses a pointer notation, we call it as file pointers. Again, the Kernighan Institute need not have done it, but they have done it. So typically this topic comes only after the pointers get done. So why do you require files? So firstly, what is the, so you require files for, I will just spell out the answer, and I will just check whether you understand where files are used typically for formatted inputs and output. Okay. So what is it all about? So I don't know whether you have been given assignments, right? I mean, the homework assignment which was given, which was an array of structures. Now, I don't know whether you faced a problem when you were running the program every time. So what are the issues that you faced basically? I mean, other than your program was working, let's say, what other issues with respect to input and output that you faced? Okay. So can someone just, I mean, this would have been, I was discussing with someone 2 days back from your class, that this would have been much better that that this class was, I mean, we would have met and I could have taken this class, because it makes things very easy for me to understand what you are answering and to figure out, I mean, not to waste time in waiting for chat box. But I can't open up the mics just like that. I mean, once in a while someone speaks out, it's okay. But every one of you start speaking together, I mean, it's going to be quite a bit of nuisance. So right now, I mean, this would have been much more easier as a discussion, which I cannot do in this format now. That in the class we are sitting and we are discussing basically, and we are hearing what other people are saying. So in absence of that, let's use chat box for the time being, and let me check basically what all things you have given. So I think some of you have faced the problems, and all those problems are valid. But there are some things which are to do with input and output more specifically. So hectic code, I don't know what Dhananjay means by that. But as Prabhav Sai is saying, and then Shanti is saying, and Gautam is saying, and yeah, Pulkit is saying that you have to input every time. So we couldn't store the data. Okay, because every time meaning every time you run the program. I mean, once the program starts running, it has the data. But what happens is when the program stops, there is no way to store that. So you might have created a big database by keeping, inserting many different records. And then you show that to someone, or you run it once. And next time you run it again, that all the data is gone. So again, you need to test or you need to check. Again, you have to input all the data. So this is the biggest problem. Database has to be initialized each time while running, but no, that is not the problem. That is the feature. I mean, that we intentionally do when the program runs. Okay. The issue is not with the initialization. Remember, I mean initialization is a very normal operation. The issue is what do you do inside the initialization. So what we were doing in the initialization, in whatever we did, was we were resetting the database. Okay, perhaps the resetting of the database has to be done the first time the program is run. But let me ask you the question that or other and then what are the requirements? So firstly, I couldn't give lot of inputs together when the program started running. Number one. Number two, I gave whatever way I gave inputs to my program and program took all of those inputs. And after let's say 30-40 minutes, program stopped working. Because I stopped the program, and then let's say I have added let's say 30 or 40 structures in the meanwhile. All of them have been lost. So what I would have ideally desired is that okay, first time I can understand I have to give the input, but why don't you basically when I stop the program, why don't you copy all of that whatever is running into somewhere, okay, into some location, and next time when I start the program again, you read it from there, because the data I don't want to lose out, right? I mean, the first year students are registered and that registration program is going on and some other program is basically I'm running. The next time I added newer students, and next time I again open up the program, I don't want again everything to be erased. I want data of earlier 100 students to be there so that I can add 10 new students today, right? So what it requires also before we go for formatted input output is what is called as persistent database. So the database that we created through array essentially was not persistent. It was not persisting across different runs of the same program. It died away after the program stopped. Not only that, I want this database to be persistent not only across runs of the program, but I want it to be across runs which are across days, months, etc. I mean, my computer can close down. It could shut down, and when I start my computer tomorrow, I don't want that data to be lost. Basically, I want persistent database. And this is not a new problem, because people in the very beginning of the history of computing realized that they have this requirement, and for that they came up basically with disk storage. Okay. So this basically what we know as hard disk, okay, or even the other disk that we have, whether it is CDs or in the older days we used to have floppy disk or something like that. These are essentially external storage, external to the processor. You may say, because you will just pick me up again and say that my hard disk resides inside the computer. I mean, why do you call it external? I mean, I'm not the external HDD I'm applying. So the answer to that is that whatever the hard disk that you have inside your computer is still outside of the processor. Okay? Processor is internal memory that we understand as RAM and things like that, but that's why it's internal memory, and it's an external memory basically to the processor, external from the viewpoint of processor. So we require this external storage, and this storage is persistent in the sense that it uses what do you call the basic electromagnetic laws, and it makes sure that the data is stored in some format, okay, which is readable, and basic electromagnetic laws are basically governing that. So you can imagine that every bit that you write, essentially you are changing some, you are using some electromagnetic law, and you are changing the alienation or alignment of the polarities of those atoms over there and things like that. So a lot of things are happening at a quantum level. So but that is the beauty of all these things, it works essentially, and it can be erasable also. Sometimes it is not erasable, sometimes it is erasable. You can erase it and write it through something else, and that's what most of the times we do. So this is persistent database. Again what people realize that this is the not only thing which is going to be useful, but you need to abstract it out and provide basically what we today understand as file system, because the user requires a way to access that, and the user cannot directly access the disk, right? And what he or she will understand. So this has been abstracted into what we understand as a file system. And this file system is a big area basically in the whole of operating systems. So I can see my disk being divided into different drives. Okay, that's how we start with. And every drive basically in turn divided into different folders and subfolders. And finally, basically I have the hierarchy. And then finally I have what I know as file. And of course, there are different types of files. There could be text files, there could be binary files, there could be executables and all those things. So right now for this particular discussion, we are dealing with what I would call as text file. Okay. And these text files can be used for formatted input and output. I could say that I can, in the text file, I can write the inputs and perhaps my output of the program can also be stored in a file. Okay. Now you imagine the stuff, and now you imagine the things again. Let's say that now you don't have to give the data from the command prompt. Okay, what you can perhaps do is you can open a text file and you know the format. For example, let's say that you are writing student record. So somehow you know that on line 1, you will write student name. Okay, so I will say that line 1 is student name. Line 2, I will write, let's say, roll number. Line 3, I will write course code. And line 4, I will write marks. Okay, and then these things will repeat for different student. I mean, this 1, 2, 3, 4 in this order. And then line 5, again, student name will come. So this is student name 1. This is roll number 1. This is course code 1. Course code 1 meaning the course code for students 1. Marks 1. And then I will again repeat it basically for second student. Okay. And this will continue. So this is one way. This is one way in which it can be done. There is of course another way, another better way also. There is one very basic way in which I can do the stuff, and I can say that for every student I have done this. Okay, so what I have done is I have stored the roll number and marks and everything in a file. Now, what is another way in which I can do? Perhaps rather than doing this, so this is one way in which I am doing. So rather than doing this, another way in which I can do formatted input output. Let's say I will call it as form 1. And this form 1 has been like this. This is a format. Form meaning format over here. But then there is other form 2 I can use basically, and I can say, okay, I don't like this for spending every line on this. Can I not use this? Can I not just have on line 1? I can just have basically student name 1, then a space or tab, whatever you want to write, roll number 1, then perhaps course code 1. See, now my line has wrapped around. Okay, so you have to understand it properly, or otherwise I have to just say SN1 just to denote that student 1. Then I have to say
Sir, but it will take same amount of memory even if we write on the same line.
That is not the point. Pulkit, you need to hold on, okay, before I complete. That is not the point. It's not about the memory basically. Okay, so course code 1, and finally I will say marks 1. Okay, now on line 2 I will have it for another student. This is SN2, RN2, CC2 and marks 2. On line 3 I will have for the third student. Guys, I am giving you time to think. Huh? I mean, I am not fond of doing this copy paste business. I'm giving you a time to think, to understand basically which of the two ways you will tend to use and which is better for you. Okay. Now you tell me, this is what I have done in the format 1. This is what I have done in the format 2. Which one you believe looks better to you from readability perspective? Pulkit? Pulkit, what is better?
Second.
So that's why you need to hold on. So the idea here was not to show that which one takes less memory or more memory. but here it is about the representation and the readability. Okay, so over here, basically this second format I may choose over format 1, irrespective of memory. By the way, let me say, tomorrow someone says that format 2 takes more memory, I don't care. I mean, I will say that this is the better way for me to write down the thing, so that I can, as a human being, I can understand these things perfectly fine. So for computer, it just doesn't matter. Computer will be okay with form 1 also. Okay, but things don't become clear. Here there is a lot of problems, in the sense that I may commit a lot of mistakes. I may skip some line, I may skip some course code somewhere, and it will be difficult to find out. Whereas if I do that line by line, and there is some kind of 2D kind of visual representation, I can clearly see that what was missing. Basically, if I miss out on, for example, this CC2 and directly write M2 basically over here, it is directly visually seeing that, oh, there is something amiss over here. Okay, so that's why this visual representation is important, and that's why many times I may prefer this second format. Okay, again, as I said, this is nothing of this I should be describing or I should be taking as part of, even if I want to teach you files, I need not take this. I'm taking this because I want to tell you, and I'm expecting some things from you. I want to tell you that how this is useful in our assignments. What is the intuition? Otherwise, I can directly take the very routine draft stuff which is there in the files. Basically, it's considered to be very boring. So the intuition over here, or the idea over here, is that perhaps you can do a good way, and you can write stuff over. Now imagine now that you have been given an option that, forget about your, someone was mentioning that every time I have to write inputs on the command prompt. Every time was structured, and every time that fellow asked that my own program, that fellow my own program, so tell me the student name, tell me the roll number, tell me the course code, tell me the marks, tell me the student name, tell me the roll number, tell me the course code, tell me the marks, and likewise. And it's so boring, right? So perhaps what I can do is I can open up a file, text file basically, and I can write in the text. I can do that through Notepad, right? I mean, I can open the file in the Notepad, and in the Notepad I can write stuff like this. Okay, I can type it out. I can say student name 1 is this, roll number 1 is this, course code is this, marks is this, and I can just repeat line by line. Okay, it makes things pretty easy for me. And let's say I do that. After that, what I do is I start running my program. Okay, now when I run my program, and I think someone pointed out that why were you initializing? I think it was Mihir. So why you initialize everything? I say initialization is the basic function or basic feature of database, right? I mean, no book will tell you. Let me tell you again. No book will tell you that initialization is a must, but I am telling you from my 10 years of experience that initialization is the most important function in any database, or any database you want to implement, even using data structures. So the initialization is not the problem. Problem is what you are initializing it. Now imagine that in the initialize function, instead of resetting all the values to zeros and slash zeros and stuff like that, why don't we do this? I mean, in the initialize, what I will do is, from the code, okay, from the code, that program needs to have a way to look into this text file. I will provide the name of this text file. Either that name can be now taken from the user, that's a different story, or the name can be provided inside the part of the program itself. But I will take that name from the user, or I will have the name over there in the file itself, in my program itself. I know this is the file that I have to look at. Okay, and somehow program can open this file, and somehow program can read these lines. And somehow program not only reads this line, it also understands that this is the student name, so it has to be read as a string. Remember, again, this is a file, so everything is a string. But now it wants to read this as a string, it wants to read this as a number, it wants to read this as a course code, which is a string, it wants to read the fourth one as a number. Okay, and suppose that way is also available. I mean, you don't have to parse the stuff. I mean, in the previous CRB, I said you have to parse it, right? I mean, you have to check whether it is a digit, and if it is a digit, you have to guess it is a number and stuff like that. I'm saying now, perhaps automatically I give you a way, okay, in which I will say that, because you know that first one is student name, second one is roll number, third one is CC, fourth one is marks. So perhaps you can automatically read these 4 things and store it in structure 1. And then you read the second line and store it in structure 2, and read it for the third line and store it in structure 3. And you continue doing that. And that is your initialization. So what happens is, when your program starts running, immediately your database or your array of structures get populated. Okay. And once it gets populated, essentially, then you are done. I mean, your database is populated. The only thing you need to do is you need to do insert and delete, and perhaps do some operations on that. So let's imagine after that you take it inside the array. Your program is running now, and now it keeps on changing the database, which is, so what you have done is that file database you have converted into array database. And now the operations are happening only on the array database. They are not happening on the file database. You review the file now. The operations, your insert, delete, and all those things that we did earlier, they are still happening on the files only. No, sorry, they are still happening on the arrays only. So it's exactly the same that we were doing earlier. Okay. In the process, what might have happened, if you realize, is that maybe I inserted 10 new data records, I updated 5 records, and perhaps I deleted 2 records. Okay. And that information is present in the array. Okay, when the program was running, and now I want to stop the program, so I say stop the program. Now as part of the stop the program, it calls another function, or it calls another functionality, which again opens the same file, basically this one, and again it starts dumping the information that it has, the current information it has in the array of records, into this file, one after the other, one line 2 lines. It will override the stuff line, because that is a current one. So line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. So the updated information which it has in the array of records, before closing the program, it will store it back exactly in the same format in the file, in the text file, and then only it quits the program. So what happens? The next time again you start running the program, because of the workflow that you have given in the initialization part of the program, again it will read now the updated database. Okay, the one which you updated last. Okay, that it will read automatically, and it will start from that point onwards. And this is what we require. Okay, this is exactly the thing, basically, that that we require. And if we do that, then a lot of our headache which we had, basically while testing, someone mentioned testing. The testing is a lot of headache, right? I mean, why do you need to, for every time testing, I have to give all those inputs and stuff like that? All of that gets eliminated. Okay, so this looks like a fantastic feature to have, and if I can kind of implement that in my program, and where I have to implement it, the first time I have to read the file and store it in array and just forget about it. So everything I do it in array, and then when I say that stop, I can say the user says stop the program. So at that point it calls. That's why the stopping program should not happen through Control C or something like that. User has to say that press 0 that to stop the program, and when he presses 0, then you say that, oh, do one thing. You copy back everything into the file, and then you copy back everything into the file, and then basically you gracefully quit the program. And once you do that, then essentially everything gets stored back. So this looks like a fantastic thing to have, and that is actually happening everywhere, right? I mean, when you access some database, okay, and then you get the values, and maybe you update database, but database stays. I mean, even after your computer is shut down or things like that, database says, and next time you again start the program, again database is up and running, and it has all the previous information, updated information. So exactly same thing I want to do with text data now with respect to my program that I'm writing. So what is it required? It requires me a way, or it requires me in the sense it requires a C program, a way to access a text file, to read the text file, and essentially to update the text file. Okay, and perhaps to do a lot of other operations also. Those things are provided through what is called as files and file pointers in C language. So file is although file is, as we understand, in the file system, but here that has been implemented through what is called as file pointers. Before I move on that, one word of caution. Someone will say that, I mean, I know this question comes. Someone will try to corner by saying that, how does the program know that when it is reading, how does it know that this is student name and this is roll number and this is course code and this is marks, and not this is roll number and this is course code and this is marks and this is CC? So what do you think answer I will give to that? So I could see now some comments saying that there is a readability problem. Every student's name will be of different length. That is not of consequence. It is of different length. Readability, see, again, you are picking up the, I mean, these are picking up the, splitting the hairs, as they say. Let me do the stuff over here. Okay, if you don't worry about it. I mean, you worry so much about it. Let me take a very, very big name. Okay. And then let's say roll number is, let's say 101101. CC course code is, let's say CSL 234, and marks is, let's say 20. And then instead in line 2, I mean, name is just 3 characters. this thing is 201. This is CSL UT something 91, and perhaps marks is 100. I think the point which has been picked up is, see, where you said that everything is one after the other in one single line, where it is, okay, and that is essentially seems to the point. So see, there is no readability. I think you need to understand that if I just miss out on this thing, won't you figure out that there is something which is missed basically when you visually look at it? And you have to contrast it, not over here, but you have to contrast it against basically I do things over here, 1 2 3 student name, roll number, course code, marks. Imagine I write one after the other. What is the guarantee? I mean you compare these two formats, which format you think is easier? Why do you want to have a condition where names are need to be the same length and stuff like that? And if they are not, yeah, who said that every name is of same length and they should end exactly the same position so that immediately it can be seen? No, even you miss something over here. Even if I miss 201 over here, is it not something you realize that there is something amiss over here? You do. Because our eyes are trained to see a string after, the string before a number and the string number. So it is easier. So it is the easiness which is there. Again, this is splitting here. Why it is splitting here? Because this is of no consequence to the discussion. Okay. So this is because I made a comment that it looks one below the other, and someone just picks up on that, saying that, oh, it is not, when the length is not same. So before asking the question, just think you by yourself also. Not everything, you cannot expect everything to be answered by me. Okay. So so reliability is with respect to the user and not the machine. Yeah, so that is true, but I think the point over here, even here the reliability is not there with respect to this. What do you do then? I will say that compare it with format 1. Okay, forget about this, compare it with format 1, then tell me. Okay, otherwise there is no reason I should have written format 1 over here. And then there could be, as I said, there could be other formats also in which perhaps you can use that. Maybe what people can do is they can write a empty line over here, just to have. But still, even after I do that, so at least I have a way of seeing 4 in batches of 4, right? There are 4, then empty line, 4, empty line, like that. So I can perhaps easily pick up that there are 4 or not. But it is only 4. Imagine that the student record or any other record has 10, 20 different items. Then it becomes difficult. But then you will say, you will pick me up. You will say it becomes difficult over here also. I agree. So again, it depends on what is, so the point is, what is good for you. If you feel this format is good for you, go ahead. If you feel this format is good for you, go ahead. If you come up with some other format, please go ahead. So that brings me back to the question that I was trying to ask you, that how does the how you will ask me the question that how does the program know that in which order to read the stuff? How does it know that first one is name and second one is roll number and third one is course code and fourth one is marks, and not that second one is marks and the fourth one is roll number? How do we know? Okay, so exactly. So what Pulkit is saying, that we program it that way because you are the programmer, and who is the reader and who is the writer? You are the one who is the reader and you are the one who is the writer. So we don't need to bluff on that. In the sense that I am the one who is writing that particular code which reads the file, and I am the one who is writing the code who writes the file, and I am also the one who has written that text file initially when the program starts. So who am I bluffing? I am the one who is responsible for everything. So now I can do that. Okay, while writing, I will write in this format and I will check whether reader can do that. It is me only, right? I know that. So the simple point over here is that it is your format. You may decide student name, I may decide student name 1, roll number, course code, marks. Tomorrow you decide to have roll number first and then student name and then course code and then marks, perfectly fine. If you want to have this way in the form 1, perfectly fine. If you want to have form 2, it is perfectly fine. So what is good for you, you decide. Okay, it is not up to me. So don't pick me on that this is good or that is bad. I will say whatever you feel is good, you just go ahead and just do it. It's just that I just mentioned that different formats could be thought of as one is better than the other, but again, it is a subjective matter. So you decide on that. Okay. So it's 11 o'clock already. So I think I have told you about the intuition behind the files and then exactly how these things get done. Basically, we can continue from this point onwards in the next class, that is on Monday. So I have released the Google Classroom link. I think so. I don't know how many of you have accepted. But perhaps a lot of other communication will be starting in this semester on the Google Classroom now. Okay. So thank you for joining. We'll start from this point onwards in the next class. Thanks.